Okay. I'm Caitlin. I am a registered dietitian and I'm one of the diabetes educators here at Providence. And I've been a diabetes educator for around 5 years now. And we've been seeing, tons of patients using medications like Ozempic for diabetes. And then about a year or so ago, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I was seeing Ozempic everywhere, all over the news. And I even heard it come up in a Saturday Night Live sketch. So it was all of a sudden just this huge phenomenon. And I was kind of thinking, this is a diabetes education. What's the big deal? And it pretty quickly became clear that people had figured out that Ozempic and other medications like it can be pretty effective for weight loss. So with all of the buzz around Ozempic and other medications in that same class, I thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about, or a little more in depth about those medications for you today. So today, I'm hoping that you are going to come away from this presentation with an understanding of why there is a need for medications that assist with weight loss, how GLP-1 receptor agonists work for diabetes and weight management, benefits, risks, and challenges associated with using GLP-1 receptor agonists, and that's the class of medications like Ozempic, how to safely use GLP-1 medications and maximize their benefits, and a little bit of insight into what the future holds. I've seen some information about what's coming in the world of weight loss, and so some little tidbits about that. Okay, so to start with, I think it can be helpful to address the question around weight loss. Well, why do we need medications? Isn't it just about eating healthier, exercising more? Why don't people just do it? So I found a couple of graphics from the CDC that I thought might be helpful in addressing this question. So this first one, the bar graph with the blue and green, is a survey from the CDC around 2013 to 2016, where they asked people if they had tried to lose weight within the last 12 months. And you can see around half of the people they asked said yes. And then if you look at the graph, you'll see that they're kind of broken down into groups by weight. And the higher the body weight, the more likely people were to say that, yes, they have tried to lose weight. And the highest group is actually women who have a BMI in the obese category. That's 71% said, yes, in the last 12 months, I have tried to lose weight. So a lot of people are trying to lose weight. And the people with the highest body weights are trying the most to lose weight. And how is that going? Well, fast forward to 2022 here, we have our prevalence chart of obesity in the United States, and we can see that most states, a majority of states, have at least 30% of people falling into that obese body mass index category. So despite all of the effort that people are putting into trying to lose weight, it is a struggle for many people, and many people are still carrying more weight than I guess they would like to. And I've been working kind of in different capacities in weight management for around 8 years now. And I would say this really confirms my experience that oftentimes people with higher body weights are really trying hard to lose weight. And it is just really challenging. Why is that? Well, weight loss is hard. There's a lot of reasons for this. A couple of my thoughts are increased automation and decreased activity is a big one. We just don't really have to move as much these days as we used to, and a lot of people don't. And changes to our food supply, our eating habits, and social norms around eating, those have been attributed to why so many people are gaining weight. And also, honestly, there's a lot that I don't think is well understood yet. The full picture of the genetic factors and the environmental factors and everything, just we don't really understand completely yet. So as difficult as it is to lose weight, it's actually even harder to maintain a weight loss. And if you look at the stats, it's anywhere from 80 to 90% of people who have a significant weight loss will end up regaining that weight. Many of them will regain more than they lost. And a lot of this has to do with kind of evolutionarily, our bodies are optimized for a different environment. Our bodies are optimized for scarcity because there used to be food scarcity for most of human history, and now there's not. And so when we lose weight, there are these compensatory mechanisms that kick in. Our metabolic rate goes down. We have hormones that make us feel hungrier, and it can be a real challenge to keep the weight off. So with all of this going on, I hope you can see why we might need some support from medications. Now, before we go too much further, I do want to say that I am actually a big proponent of a health at every size or more of a weight neutral approach to nutrition and diabetes. And weight is not everything when it comes to health. And so many people can be very healthy at, in a larger body, but there are still some really compelling reasons that people might have to want to lose weight, whether it's a health condition or maybe just some discomfort associated with being in a larger body. And so does everybody need to lose weight just because they have a higher body mass index? Not necessarily, but many people do still want to. So we've had weight loss medications for some time. And here's a look at some of the most popular weight loss medications pre-Ozempic. And if you look at weight loss, they typically you could expect to lose around 5 to 10% of your body weight. So if you were starting at 200 pounds, for example, that would look like about 10 to 20 pounds. Some of these medications have some pretty unfortunate side effects. One that sticks out to me is orlistat has a side effect of anal leakage. Qsymia has a stimulant in it, which can have some pretty uncomfortable side effects. So they can be effective, but not hugely effective for most people. And also, they tend to be pretty expensive. Insurance coverage in the United States for weight loss medications is not great. We're going to talk more about that later. But looking at the return on your investment, maybe it's not worth it to spend a lot of money to lose about 10 pounds and maybe have some bad side effects. So not a lot of people are really using these weight loss medications. Enter Ozempic and similar medications. So this is a whole new world for weight loss medications. So now I'm going to take a look at GLP1 and GIP receptor agonists, which is the class of medications that Ozempic falls into. And we're going to talk more about how they work and what you need to know about them. So GLP1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. This is a hormone that our digestive systems naturally produce after we eat food. What it does is it promotes satiety or a feeling of fullness, and it reduces your appetite. So when you've eaten food, it's one of the hormones that tells your brain that it's time to stop eating because you're full. It also slows the movement of food through your digestive system. So your stomach is going to empty slower and your intestines are going to move a little bit slower. And that also helps you feel fuller for longer. It also does some really great things for blood sugars. It increases insulin secretion after you eat food. And so that helps bring down your blood sugars after you've eaten. It improves sensitivity to insulin in the muscle cells. So that means that your insulin is going to work better and you're going to more efficiently use food or sugar that you eat from your food. It also reduces excess glucose production from your liver. And this is one of the main underlying problems of diabetes, of type 2 diabetes. So it improves that problem, which can lower blood sugars, and it reduces accumulation of fat in the liver, which also is really helpful in type 2 diabetes. So a majority of medications in this class that we have now are just using GLP-1, but there is a new medication that we're going to talk about that also incorporates another hormone called GIP, gastric inhibitory polypeptide. So I want to talk a little bit about that one. So GIP works synergistically with GLP-1. It has an increased effect on that insulin secretion after meals, so it's going to further increase it. It also is protective against damage to the pancreas that happens over time when you have diabetes. It helps improve insulin sensitivity in the muscle cells even more than GLP-1, and it really increases that appetite suppression that leads to greater weight loss than just GLP-1 alone. So these two hormones can work synergistically. So who should take these medications, or who are they meant for? First and foremost, these types of medications like Ozempic were developed for people with type 2 diabetes to lower blood sugar. And it turned out that they helped people lose weight. So they started to get indications for obesity and for weight loss as well. And we'll talk more about this, but there is some data that shows that they have protective effects against cardiovascular disease. And so specifically, folks with diabetes who are at a high risk for cardiovascular disease, these medications are a great option for them. Contraindications. These medications are not for people with type 1 diabetes. They're not currently FDA approved for use in type 1 diabetes. I know it does happen off-label, and I've heard some folks are finding it to be really beneficial, but they're not approved right now. They're not well studied in pregnancy and breastfeeding, so not recommended to use during that time. For folks who have a history of pancreatitis, gastroparesis, or severe gastroesophageal reflux, they can worsen those issues. And so it's not recommended to use them. And this is rare, but there are some animal studies that show issues with a specific type of thyroid cancer. So folks with a history of medullary thyroid cancer are not recommended to use GLP-1s. So let's talk a little more about how these medications are beneficial for diabetes. This here is the ominous octet, which is looking at 8 of the main dysfunctions that lead to high blood sugar in type 2 diabetes. And if you'll see, there's little boxes next to each of the dysfunctions that include types of medications. All of the ones that have a green arrow are indicating GLP-1. And you'll see that there are 6 of them. So 6 out of the 8 dysfunctions that are most problematic for type 2 diabetes are benefited or addressed by GLP-1 medications. So these medications can be very effective for type 2 diabetes. You might notice that some of the other types of medications might be approaching 1, 2, or 3 issues with diabetes, but GLP-1s really attack diabetes from a lot of different angles. A couple other notes about GLP-1 and GIP receptor agonists for diabetes. So these are naturally occurring hormones, and they have been found to be lower in people with type 2 diabetes. So people with diabetes may not make as much GLP-1 or GIP. And low levels of these hormones is part of what might be contributing to low insulin production and higher blood glucose, among other issues in people with diabetes. Also, the hormone that we do produce in our bodies is broken down pretty quickly. And the forms that are used in medications are longer lasting, and they provide a more prolonged effect. So that's another way that they're helpful. And one of the things that we really love with these medications is that they don't cause dangerously low blood sugar. Now, if you use them in conjunction with another medication that does cause dangerously low blood sugar, and you add on a GLP-1, it can make blood sugars go too low. But just by themselves, they don't cause hypoglycemia. So that's really great. Here's a look at the available medications in this class right now. This isn't a completely completely exhaustive list, but these are the main ones that people use. And I've listed them here in this chart, kind of in order of when they came out. And we'll see that that also is in order of their effectiveness. But the compounds that are available for GLP-1s are exenatide, and that's available as under the brand names Byetta and Bydureon. Those are for diabetes. Liraglutide is available as Victoza, which is a once daily injection for diabetes. And then Saxenda is the weight loss medication that is made from liraglutide at a higher dose. Dulaglutide is Trulicity, which is a once weekly injection for diabetes. Semaglutide is Ozempic, which is a once weekly diabetes medication. It's also available in an oral form as a pill. So it's the only GLP-1 medication currently on the market that is a pill instead of an injection. And semaglutide is also available as Wegovy, which is a slightly higher dose than Ozempic, a once weekly injection just for weight loss. And the newest one on the market, which is the first one that contains GLP1 and GIP, so it is a dual receptor agonist, is Mounjaro. Mounjaro is a once weekly injection for diabetes, and Zepbound just came out for weight loss. And it is the same molecule as Mounjaro. So these are the available medications. Now let's look at their effectiveness for diabetes. So of the medications that are approved for diabetes, you can see here that they've basically been getting more and more effective as new ones come out. You can see in the middle, we have the A1C reduction. So these are average numbers mostly based on research that have been done during the process of approving these medications. And you can see A1C reductions vary from about 1% all the way up to 2.3% at the maximum dose of Mounjaro. Now, if you're not familiar with A1C, it is a measure that is used to kind of monitor how diabetes is going or how well managed it is. It's about a 3-month average of your blood sugar. So lowering A1C is usually the main goal for managing diabetes. And if we look at weight loss has also been increasing. So I listed weight loss from studies that are looking at over the course of around a year to a year and a half, depending on the study, how much weight did people with diabetes lose when they were taking these medications at the maximum dose. For Trulicity, it's around 5%, and trials showed about an average of 10 pounds for people taking Trulicity. For Ozempic, people lose around 10% of their body weight, or around 14 pounds for Ozempic and 10 pounds for Rybelsus in the clinical trials. And for Mounjaro, that one has the most weight loss, about 15%, or an average of 34 pounds in studies of people with type 2 diabetes. And here's kind of another way of looking at the weight loss for people with diabetes. This is tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro. In all of the blue lines are tirzepatide, and it's comparing it to 1 milligram of Ozempic, semaglutide. Now, I will say 1 milligram is not the maximum dose for Ozempic, so I'm not sure why they use 1 milligram. It does go up to 2 milligrams. But in people with diabetes, you can see that at the maximum dose of Mounjaro, which is the dark blue line, about 86% of people lost at least 5% of their body weight, 65% lost at least 10%, and 40% lost at least 15%. So people are losing quite a bit of weight with these medications. The other thing that is really great about GLP-1 receptor agonists is they are showing some really promising benefits for reducing the risk of complications associated with diabetes. So, two GLP-1 medications so far, liraglutide and semaglutide, have shown benefits in reducing the risk of major adverse cardiovascular events, which include heart attacks, strokes, and death from cardiovascular disease. Liraglutide, which is Victoza, showed a 13% relative risk reduction for cardiovascular events for people with diabetes, and that's 1.9% absolute risk reduction. And then semaglutide had an even greater reduction of 26% relative risk, 2.3% absolute risk reduction for heart attack, stroke, and death from cardiovascular disease. So that's pretty exciting. And at this time, no other GLP-1 medications are approved for reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease, but there are ongoing studies. And so there may be more indications coming. And another exciting thing is there's some new research coming out, a trial that was ongoing and was just stopped early because the results were so good, looking at semaglutide and reducing or slowing the risk of progression of kidney disease. So showing some protective effects of semaglutide on diabetic kidney disease. So that's very exciting. So now let's transition and look at people who do not have diabetes. So the three medications that are approved for weight loss that are not used for diabetes, but just for the general population are Saxenda, Wegovy, and Zepbound. So weight loss for the three of them is about 9% for Saxenda, 16% for Wegovy, and 21% for Zepbound over about a year to a year and a half period, depending on the study. And just to give you a little perspective, if you are starting at 250 pounds, that would be 23 pounds lost for Saxenda, 40 pounds for Wegovy, and 52 for Zepbound. And here's another way of looking at some of these weight loss results. So this is for Zepbound, tirzepatide, comparing it to a placebo. And the dark teal line is looking at the highest dose of Zepbound, 15 milligrams. And you can see that 91% of people lost at least 5% of their body weight. And then if you look all the way at the highest number, a full 36% of people lost more than 25% or greater than or equal to 25% of their body weight. So that is pretty impressive weight loss results. So one thing that I would like to point out here, if you look at the little side note here, this little paragraph, I pulled this from the study that was showing these results. It says tirzepatide was used as an adjunct to lifestyle intervention. Lifestyle intervention included regular lifestyle counseling sessions delivered by a dietitian or a qualified healthcare professional to help the participants adhere to healthful, balanced meals with a deficit of 500 calories per day and at least 150 minutes of physical activity per week. So what is this saying? This is saying that all of these weight loss results are for the use of tirzepatide in addition to a comprehensive program of healthy eating, calorie reduction, and exercise. So that's important because I think, these are compared to placebo, where you see people still did lose weight when they were just doing the lifestyle interventions. And we can see that you can add on a lot of weight loss with these medications, but the diet and exercise portion does still matter. And there is also some exciting newer data that shows that there is a 20% relative risk reduction of major adverse cardiovascular events, so that heart attack, stroke, and death from cardiovascular disease, compared to the standard of care from people without diabetes who took Wegovy. And so this is looking at on top of the standard of taking things like statins and blood pressure medications. If you add on Wegovy, there's an additional small increase in your risk reduction for having a heart attack or a stroke. So that is exciting. So far, Wegovy is the only one that has this protective effect that's been shown in research, but there are certainly ongoing studies for things like Mounjaro that may come out. So there are many good things about these GLP-1 receptor agonists, but there are also some downsides. So we're going to talk about some of those downsides now. And one of the big ones is the cost. So if you look at the out-of-pocket cost for the big, most popular ones, Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound, it starts at around $1,000 a month. So pretty spendy. Now, insurance for people who have diabetes generally is going to cover these medications pretty well. If you have a commercial plan, like an insurance through your work or anything other than Medicare or Medicaid or TRICARE or any state insurance, you may be eligible to use a copay card, and these cards can bring down your copay cost, and they will also pay some towards your deductible. So for example, the last I checked, Ozempic will pay, the savings card for Ozempic will pay $150 per month towards your deductible. So if you have a high deductible, it's nice because it can help bring it down. So that's something that can help a little bit with the cost. One of the big issues that I run into in my practice as a diabetes educator is that people who have Medicare may fall into the coverage gap, also known as the donut hole, because these medications are very expensive. And the way that the coverage gap works is complicated. So I'm not going to get all the way into it right now, but it's basically once you reach a certain level of annual spending, Medicare stops covering as much of your medicines and your costs will go up. So what this usually looks like is you have kind of a normal copay for, let's say, Ozempic for most of the year, and then mid to late year, you go to refill your prescription and all of a sudden it's hundreds of dollars and the copay has gone way up. That probably means you're in the coverage gap. So unfortunately, there's not a ton that you can do other than kind of just paying your way through it. Sometimes people stop taking these medications, or what we do a lot is we see if people are eligible for a patient assistance program. Right now, the only GLP-1 medication that is accepting applicants for patient assistance is Ozempic, and their requirement is that people need to make 400% of the federal poverty level or less. And you can check online with federal poverty level calculators and see where your income falls. And if you make 400% or less and you're having trouble paying for your Ozempic, you will likely qualify. If you're interested in seeing if you qualify and you're having cost issues with Ozempic, your diabetes educator, one of our team can help you, or you can ask your doctor. So that is kind of a workaround. Right now, for folks who have Medicaid or Apple Health in Washington, they cover Victoza and Byetta. They're not currently covering any of the once weekly medications, but you can get Victoza. And insurance for weight loss coverage, insurance coverage for weight loss medications is generally not great right now, but it is slowly but surely starting to improve. So I would say if you don't have coverage for something like Wegovy or Zepbound and you don't have diabetes, just keep checking back with your insurance and see if they have started to cover it. I expect that coverage is going to improve in the coming years, but we'll see. So what about compounding pharmacies? This is something that I'm seeing more and more of. So I will say I'm not a pharmacist, so I'm not an expert on compounding pharmacies and how they work, but here's what I understand. Semaglutide and tirzepatide are currently on the FDA's drug shortage list because they're so overwhelmingly popular. So because they are on the shortage list, that means that compounding pharmacies can produce compounded versions of these medications and they can sell them for cheaper. Here's a statement from the FDA's website. patients and healthcare professionals should understand that the agency does not review compounded versions of these drugs for safety, effectiveness, or quality. So compounded medications are not going through the same rigorous evaluation and monitoring process that regular medications do. And so you kind of can use them at your own risk, is basically what they're saying. There are something called salt forms of GLP-1 compounds that may be used, and the FDA put out a statement that the safety and efficacy of them is really not known. And they also said adverse events with compounded semaglutide have been reported. They did not elaborate on that, so I don't know what those adverse events are, but apparently they've happened. As a safety precaution, obtain prescriptions from state licensed pharmacies that are located in the US. You can probably buy compounded semaglutide online. The FDA is recommending that you use extreme caution with that. They have a Be Safe RX campaign that you can check out for more information on buying medications online. I will say, in my experience, I've talked to a few people who've had just a completely fine experience with buying semaglutide from a compounded pharmacy and said that it worked fine for them, no safety issues. But you want to proceed with caution. And the cost is going to be a lot lower. From what I've heard numbers closer to like $150 to $250 a month, which is still quite a bit, but it's a lot less than $1,000. So something to look into. Another question that I often get is, if I take something like Ozempic or Mounjaro, am I going to have to take it forever for weight loss? And the short answer is probably yes, if you want to maintain the weight loss. Obesity is considered a chronic condition, much like heart disease and diabetes. And for chronic conditions that we don't have a cure for, medications are usually taken on an ongoing basis to manage the condition. And those medications are going to work while you're taking them, much like a blood pressure medicine. If you take a medicine for your blood pressure, it's going to work while you're taking it, and then your blood pressure will likely go up again if you go off it. And in looking at research on what happens when people lose weight on GLP-1s and they go off of them, oftentimes they regain the weight. Not every time, everybody is different, but in general, people do. So you would want to think of it as a long-term thing if you were going to start one of these medications. Another big downside of these medications is most people don't have side effects, but when people do have side effects, they can be pretty nasty. The biggest side effect that people have is nausea. By far, that's the most common. It can be so severe that there's vomiting. The second biggest one I hear is diarrhea, sometimes even constipation. You may also experience acid reflux because your stomach is emptying more slowly. Also, bloating and gas have been reported. Usually, people will have the worst side effects right when they start the medication or when they increase their dose. And within 4 to 6 weeks, they tend to fade or go away or at least become manageable. In some cases, they don't. And I've certainly seen people who end up stopping the medication because they just feel too sick. But for the most part, they do go away. And here's just a snippet from some of the data from Ozempic's website about their people reporting complications in their studies. And so looking at this chart, you can ignore the first column because that's comparing it to insulin. But the second and the third column are looking at the 0.5 and the 1 milligram doses of Ozempic. And you can see out of 360 or so people, how many people reported side effects. It's not a ton. And if you look at the very bottom, you can see that only 3 to 5 people at each dose discontinued the treatment because they felt so bad. So most people did keep taking it even though they were having side effects, and only a few people did stop. So I will say I do pretty frequently see people having side effects from Ozempic. Most of the time they're manageable. Sometimes they're not. Here are some tips for how you can manage the side effects if you do have them. It's helpful to eat smaller and more frequent meals. If you eat a really large meal all at once, it can really worsen the feelings of nausea or bloating or reflux. Avoiding greasy and high-fat meals can be helpful. You want to stop eating when you're starting to feel full. So if you have that fullness feeling, which keep in mind is likely to come earlier than it used to before you started Ozempic, because Ozempic increases feelings of fullness, or any GLP-1 that is. If you start feeling that fullness and you do continue to eat, you're likely to feel worse. It's important to stay hydrated. Dehydration can lead to some more serious side effects that we're going to talk about. So it's a good idea to kind of in between your meals be sipping on a lot of water. Don't lay down right after you're eating, especially if you have reflux. So if you tend to get like heartburn or acid reflux and you eat and you lay down immediately, it can be worse. So you want to stay upright for at least a few hours after you eat. Eating more slowly is a great strategy for preventing overeating and filling your stomach too much, which can worsen the side effects. So slowing down your pace of eating can be very helpful. And if you're having a lot of nausea, you may do better with bland foods for a little while until the side effects get better. Sometimes in rare cases, very rare cases, there are more severe side effects. So I just want to mention them. These are things that if you experience signs of them, you want to go immediately to your doctor right away. Severe digestive problems leading to dehydration can happen. So sometimes the vomiting or the diarrhea is so severe that you become dehydrated. That puts you at risk for what's called acute kidney injury, which is really severe stress on your kidneys from dehydration. Gallbladder problems can happen. This can be a severe side effect of anything that causes rapid weight loss, even a diet. So that's something to be aware of. Pancreatitis, like I mentioned earlier, if you have a history of pancreatitis, you probably don't want to take these medications. And there is a little bit of a link to pancreatitis being caused by GLP-1s. There have been a few reports of bowel obstruction because of the slowing down of food moving through your digestive tract. So if you are, not able to have a bowel movement for an unusual period, that's something to get checked out. Of course, there can be allergic reactions to pretty much any medication. Hypoglycemia, we already mentioned, is not going to happen just because of Ozempic or another GLP-1 medication. It could happen if you're also taking insulin or a pill called a sulfonylurea, like glipizide. Those medications do cause too low of blood sugar. So if you add in another diabetes medication that lowers blood sugar, you can go too low. There also have been some reports of people with worsening vision after starting to take specifically Ozempic, semaglutide. So if you had vision changes after starting it, you would want to get that checked out. And now I'd like to talk about a common side effect that I'm seeing pretty frequently, and I know my colleagues are too, that is not really being talked about enough. GLP-1 receptor agonists can really lower your appetite, and the intensity of that effect really varies from person to person. Some people hardly have an effect at all, and I've seen a number of people to where they can hardly eat, and their intake is really, really low. And that puts you at risk of malnutrition. Specifically, if you're losing a lot of weight, but you're not eating enough protein, you can lose quite a bit of muscle. And the problem with that is losing your muscle can lead to weakness, balance issues, reduced functional capacity. There's all sorts of negative outcomes that happen when people lose too much muscle. So we really want to prevent that. Also, if you are just not eating much or you're not able to eat a variety of fruits and vegetables and other healthy foods, you are at risk for other nutrient deficiencies as well. So here's how to make sure that you get enough nutrition when you are taking a GLP-1 or GIP receptor agonist. If you are finding that you have a pretty severe appetite reduction and it's hard to eat enough, some of these strategies might help. You really want to focus on protein because, as I mentioned, we want to protect your muscle mass. So getting adequate protein at every meal and every snack is a good idea. I'll talk in a second about what that looks like. I highly recommend an eating schedule. So for folks who used to rely on their body to tell them when it was time to eat, keep in mind that that messaging pathway of your body telling your brain that you're hungry and it's time to eat is not working like it used to. The signal is dampened. And so I routinely hear people say, I forget to eat during the day. I just get busy and I don't realize how much time has gone by and I haven't eaten all day. I recently had someone tell me some days all she's eating is a cheese stick, just one cheese stick or one yogurt. So there are people who really are just forgetting to eat or not thinking about it. And if you've been trying to lose weight for a while and eat less, not feeling hungry can be something that you sort of just go with and you think, good, it's going to help me lose weight. But the reality is you still need nutrition. So you do need to eat. I recommend a schedule with at least 3 meals a day at regular intervals. It's helpful to eat smaller, more frequent meals. That could look like 3 small meals with 2 or 3 snacks. Could look like 5 to 6 just small meals throughout the day. But if you eat a large meal all at once, like we discussed, you can feel worse, or you just might not really be able to get it down. And so smaller meals, but more often, can help you get in all your nutrition. You want to drink plenty of fluid so you stay hydrated, but it can be helpful to drink them between meals instead of with meals so you're not filling up your stomach on fluid. Don't forget about your fruits and vegetables. You still need to have vitamins and minerals from your food. And so, like I mentioned, people who are getting the best results from GLP-1 medications are also focusing on healthy eating. And that means, yes, get in your protein, but also try and get in your fruits and vegetables as well. If you're really having a hard time eating enough, I am frequently recommending supplements like protein drinks, things like Fairlife or Premier or Glucerna, anything that is a liquid that's going to provide some protein can help you meet your protein needs if it's hard to eat. You may also need vitamin and mineral supplements if you're just not eating very much food, especially fruits and vegetables. If you can, come see a registered dietitian. Our team can help you create a plan. I am routinely doing nutrition assessments for anybody who comes to me who's taking one of these medications. And it's pretty common that I find that they're not eating enough or they're not meeting their nutritional needs. So I recommend getting a nutrition assessment if you can. And as a reminder, you can enhance your weight loss and your health benefits from taking these medications if you do it in conjunction with a program of healthy eating and exercise habits. And another thing that really helps with protecting your muscle mass is doing some strength exercise, whether it's resistance from lifting weights or just your body weight, anything that's going to help build and maintain your muscle. Here's a little bit about what it looks like to eat healthy with diabetes. We use the plate method, about a quarter of your plate from carbohydrates. Ideally, they're high in fiber, a quarter of your plate from lean proteins, and then lots of vegetables. So this balance is still helpful if you're taking a GLP-1 and you want to get the most health benefits. And then here are some examples of protein. So protein comes from any type of meat or fish, and ideally you're choosing lean sources, which is best for heart health. A good portion is at least 3 ounces. You can also get protein from beans, nuts and seeds, yogurt, especially Greek yogurt or cottage cheese. Milk has a little bit. Eggs are a good option. Soy products like tofu. And go for at least 3 ounces if you're having meat, or about the size of the palm of your hand or a deck of cards if you want to make sure you're getting enough protein at each meal. or about 6 ounces if you're doing yogurt or cottage cheese, a couple of eggs. That's a good serving of protein. And for exercise, the recommendation is about 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity aerobic exercise and doing some muscle strengthening to build and preserve your muscle mass at least twice a week. So what does the future of weight loss medications look like? Well, I would expect to see a lot more GLP-1 and other hormone receptor agonists. There are quite a few medications that are in development right now and have trials being done on them right now. The next one that I've heard of that's likely to come out is called retatrutide. Sorry, it's a mouthful. But that one is a triple receptor agonist. So that one has GLP1, GIP, and I believe also glucagon, which is another hormone that affects appetite and weight and blood sugar. Average weight loss from medications is going to keep going up with new ones that come out. It's going to start approaching levels that we see with bariatric surgery just from taking a medication. I think we can expect to see them become increasingly affordable. And we can certainly expect to see weight management programs that are incorporating medications. For example, Weight Watchers is starting to do this. I think there's a recognition that it's hard to do it with just diet and exercise. And so there's going to be, I think, a big move towards incorporating these medications. Okay, so that's all I have for you. Erica has a couple of updates about our upcoming events.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Caitlin. Great presentation, super helpful information. We can just leave this slide up here, but there's some questions in the Q&A and in the chat I want to make sure we get to. So I'm just going to start with those. I'll try and hit all of them. I'm trying to go in the order that they came. There's a question about insurance here, Caitlin. Currently, Providence Insurance does not cover these medications for weight loss. These medications are very costly, as you mentioned. Do you know, will that be changing in the future, specifically for Providence?
I don't know of any upcoming changes for specific insurance plans. I would just expect to see a trend in the next 5 to 10 years of them starting to be covered, but it's challenging because they are so expensive that I think a lot of insurance plans are kind of hesitant to cover them.
Okay, and then there's a couple questions about getting copies of the chart, which we absolutely will send to you via email, and all the resources and things that Caitlin has talked about here. Then there's another question I have here in the chat. Can someone who is not pregnant but wants to become pregnant be on it, or can it affect them becoming pregnant on any of those medications?
There's a lot in that question. Can it affect you becoming pregnant? For somebody who has like PCOS or insulin resistance, or is struggling to get pregnant, sometimes weight loss can help, or sometimes a medication that improves insulin resistance can help. That being said, it is recommended at least like several months before you start trying to get pregnant to stop taking a GLP-1. So
couple more that I have here for you. If these medications take away the hunger sensation, why do people stop losing weight after a certain % weight loss, even if they're also working on diet and exercise?
Good question. I think a little bit of that falls into that category of like, we don't really know yet. There are kind of gaps in scientific knowledge around weight, but everybody's different. And I guess in theory, your appetite is going to be suppressed. And so you have kind of a certain amount of calorie reduction that'll get you to a certain weight, and then you're likely to plateau. Also, if you look at the weight loss from these medications, it's typically in the neighborhood of like 10%, 15% on the high end. And so that's not usually that's not necessarily going to be like 100 pounds, or, if you have a lot of weight to lose, it may not get you all the way there. And it's common to kind of hit weight loss plateaus, regardless of what you use.
And then another question in here, you talked about a couple slides ago about beverages, specifically carbonated beverages. So this person's asking, why do you recommend drinking carbonated beverages?
Oh, thanks for asking that. I guess I need to clarify. I'm not recommending that you drink carbonated beverages. What I was trying to get at is that if you drink carbonated beverages with food, it can worsen reflux and it can really make you feel full. So if you're trying to reduce your side effects from a GLP-1 medication, carbonated beverages, you want to drink them apart from food or maybe avoid them.
Awesome. Thanks for the clarification there. Someone else here is asking, if someone wants to lose weight and maintain weight loss, are there ways to manage the hormonal changes without these medications? What can we recommend clients to try before medications?
Mm. Well, we have some weight management programs here. And there's always diet and exercise. Weight loss is, in theory, calories in, calories out, right? So increasing exercise and reducing calories can often help with weight loss. As I mentioned in the beginning, it's just tough. And it doesn't always work in predicted ways for everybody. But, you can certainly, people do lose weight with just diet and exercise. And if you're kind of consistent with the behaviors that helped you lose weight, you may be able to maintain at least some of that weight loss. It's just hard for a lot of people.
Definitely. Someone else put in the chat here that they read an article about the cost benefit of GLP-1 versus surgery for obesity. I'm sure Caitlin and I would both love to read that. So we've got our email on our screen here that Caitlin is sharing, the wellness.wa@providence.org. We'd love to read any of those articles that you're thinking about when this comes to mind too. And then last question, Caitlin, that I'm seeing here for you is someone is asking, I've heard that some foods also stimulate the hormones more than other foods. What foods would improve these natural hormones?
Yeah, that's a great point. So you may be able to increase your body's own natural GLP-1 and maybe GIP production by eating foods with protein and certain types of fiber, like resistant starch or more complex carbohydrates, among others, but those are the two that come to mind.
Great. Well, thanks, Caitlin. I think that's all the questions that I'm seeing. I'm hoping I didn't miss any. If any of you have any questions that maybe I didn't get answered here today, feel free to shoot us an email. Again, our email is here on that slide that Caitlin is showing, that wellness.wa@providence.org. Our next webinar, we do them every month, is in May with Dan, another one of our dietitians here, on a term he likes to call nutrient triage. And that's our next one, which we'll send you out via email as well, along with this recording too. So again, reach out if you have any other questions, but otherwise, thanks so much for joining us and joining Caitlin today.
Thanks, everyone.